I'm Maggie Winkle, LD18 chair. We're lucky to have two candidates here who are running for the Arizona Corporation Commission, Jonathon Hill and Clara Pratte. Our speakers are two of five Democratic candidates currently running for the Arizona Corporation Commission. On this call is also Derek Espadas, who is running for that seat. There are five ACC commissioners, and their responsibility is to oversee proceedings about regulated utilities in Arizona. That's water, electricity, telephone, and natural gas. They help set utility rates, which people often aren't aware of, so it really affects them personally. So we need to talk up what the Arizona Corporation Commission is. Also, historically, the commission established mandates for renewable energy generation. In 2023, however, the commission rejected the idea of establishing mandates. So there are no mandates. All five current members of the Arizona Corporation Commission belong to Donald Trump's party, and Trump has set the tone when it comes to renewable energy. They consider it the scam of the century. With that lead in, let's let the candidates speak. Mr. Hill will start, followed by Ms. Pratte. After hearing both of them, we will ask questions. Listeners, please put your questions in the Zoom chat, and Monica will monitor that. And following the presentations of both of those speakers, Monica will pose the questions to the candidates. I'm pleased to introduce our first speaker, Jonathon Hill. Jonathon has a master's degree in aerospace engineering and a PhD in geological sciences, both from ASU. Jonathon would like to bring his unique perspective to the Arizona Corporation Commission. He spent the past 18 years at ASU working on several NASA space missions focused on Mars, Jupiter, and asteroids. Jonathon believes his extensive engineering experience gives him a deep understanding of the challenges facing our power generation and water distribution infrastructure. His expertise in geology is particularly valuable for groundwater management issues, especially in rural communities where it's crucial. Okay, now you're on. You get 15 minutes. Thanks.
Okay, well, thank you for that wonderful introduction. Usually they just like push us out on the stage and we're off. So thanks everyone for having us tonight. My name is Jonathon Hill. I'm one of the many Corporation Commission candidates. Hopefully, before Maggie did her introduction, many of you were familiar with the Corporation Commission and how important it is for Arizonans. So many people just don't understand the connection between their utility bills and the commission. They think that the utility companies, especially power, TEP and APS, just raise their rates and that they have no recourse, that they just have to deal with them. They don't connect it that, that those utilities are accountable through the Arizona Corporation Commission. And so that's just something I would hope that all of you will help us spreading the message on, is just helping people make that connection so that they realize how important it is to vote for this office and realize, how important it is to be an informed voter. One unfortunate statistic I like to tell people about is that in the last election, if everyone who had voted for Kamala Harris and everyone who had voted for Ruben Gallego had continued down the ballot and had voted for Corporation Commission, we would have won 3 seats and we would currently have a majority on the Corporation Commission. Instead, all 3 seats were won by Republicans due to that voter drop-off, and we have a 100% Republican commission, and you can imagine how well that's going. So please just talk to your friends, your family, your neighbors, and just help them make that connection. We found it's a really easy sell. It takes about 30 seconds of explanation, and most people are sold, and they want to know more about this office. So a little bit about me. Maggie did a great job of introducing me. Yeah, my background is not in politics at all. Actually, you must have an older version of my bio because I'm now up to 20 years that I've worked at ASU. Um, yeah, working on a number of NASA space missions as a satellite operations engineer, and I got to work on the cute little Mars rovers, Spirit and Opportunity. They look like Wally from the Pixar movie. A couple orbiters, a couple asteroid missions, a Jupiter mission that's on its way now, and yeah, I started out on the engineering side, but I really just fell in love with the science. No one ever told me in high school, in a career day, that you could have a career studying other planets. And so after getting my master's degree, I switched over and did my PhD in geological sciences. And that's what really drove my interest in the Corporation Commission, because at least as of a couple years ago, there were no commissioners with any sort of STEM background, which seems kind of ridiculous given the fact that they're regulating these very technical industries. Now, I will acknowledge that we do. One of the Republican commissioners is a mechanical engineer. He did work for 20 years as an engineer. Unfortunately, he worked for those 20 years at Southwest Gas and has been very supportive of every rate increase that Southwest Gas has requested of the commission. So I don't think we should fully count that one. Um, so yeah, if you might remember me, I did run in 2024 as part of the commission's a little confusing because in presidential years there's 3 seats available, and then in gubernatorial years there's 2 seats available on the commission. They switch, so this is a year with 2 seats available. But yeah, I was among the 3 candidates in 2024. As I said, unfortunately, we came up a little short, but me and my team, we learned so much about this race. That was like I said, my first time running for office. I don't know why I picked a statewide office as my first attempt. That was absolutely insane. But we learned so much, and you know, in our kind of wrap ups, it was we always thought that well, if only we knew at the end, if we knew that at the beginning, how different we could have done everything. How much of a better shot we would have had, and we decided to go back and give it another shot. So, and one of the main things that convincing, because that's not easy being a candidate. Hats off to any other candidates out there. It's not an easy thing to do. But the thing that really kind of drove this home for me is going around the state last year and just talking to Arizonans. We went to all 15 counties, we went to all 30 LDs, and talking to people. So many people are struggling with their utility bills. We have seniors on fixed incomes. We have families that are trying to support their children, as well as, make ends meet at the end of the month. We have veterans that are trying to get on their feet after leaving the service. Just so many people that, you know, just don't need an extra bill constantly being increased, constantly draining their finances. And I'm not anti-utility by any means. We need healthy utilities. They need to be financially healthy, because if they go bankrupt, well, we're all in a bad boat in that situation. But the commission is there to maintain this really delicate balance between the needs of the utility companies on one hand, but also the financial needs of their customers. And that's why our founders in 1912 put this in the state constitution. They thought it was extremely important that this be a voter elected office, not appointed like in many other states. And I think that that balance was maintained really well for a very long time. It's just in the last, well, 20 to 30 years that we've been seeing an increasingly, unbalance in that equation. And if you've seen your utility bill, the companies keep coming back for rate increase after rate increase. Especially right now, they see a 5-member Republican commission, and they rightly assume, I think, that they'll get anything they ask for. And so we really need to elect 2 Democratic commissioners to the commission this year, next year in 2026. And one thing I know people ask us is, say we do elect two commissioners. Well, what would we be able to do? Because we would still be in the minority. Well, turns out you can actually do a lot. One of our wonderful previous Democratic commissioners, Sandra Kennedy, she established a precedent that any single commissioner has subpoena power. So even a single commissioner can subpoena any of the utility companies for any documents related to any price increases that they're pushing for, any uh, power plants that they're trying to cite, any transmission lines they're trying to build, anything that falls under the commission's purview. So, um, and with two, we could do even more with that. So I guess that's a little bit about me, a little bit about the office, and I won't take up the full 15 minutes. I'll leave it so we have some time for questions later. But I guess now I'll turn it back to Maggie to introduce Clara.
Hi, Clara. Welcome.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Clara has built her career on public service and is now a successful small business owner and entrepreneur, as well as a mom to two boys. She's running to lower costs for Arizonans, restore integrity to the Arizona Corporation Commission, strengthen consumer protections, and ensure Arizona urgently harnesses its clean energy potential before it's too late. Claire is a member of the Navajo Nation and grew up on the nation in a small town on the Arizona-New Mexico border. Her family did not have access to utilities or running water until she was in middle school. This race to oversee Arizona's utilities is personal. Clara, you have 15 minutes.
Thank you so much. Right, thank you so much. Well, thanks so much for making time for me to be here today. Just a little bit about me and why I'm running. I think you summed it up pretty nicely there. I'm an Arizonan and grew up on the Navajo Nation, no access to utilities, so it is a really personal history and story and passion of mine to ensure that everybody in our state has access to reliable utilities. I started a small business in 2015, and then I started another business in 2018. And in 2018, co-founded Navajo Power Public Benefit Corporation, which is a large utility scale solar development company. So I've got a lot of experience and background in the renewables space. But prior to that, in my previous life, I was in Washington, D.C., and I worked on behalf of many different leaders, both on the federal side as well as the tribal side. I did a stint at the U.S. Department of Commerce. I worked for a little bit on the Hill for the late Congressman Grijalva. I'm a graduate of University of Arizona, so I've got some ties to the Southern Arizona region. And my intent was to spend a couple years in DC and to move back to Arizona. Well, in the blink of an eye, it was 13 years passed by super quick before I ended up moving back to Arizona. But my eye has always been on how can we improve outcomes for Arizonans? How can we improve policy for Arizonans? And the Corporation Commission is something that I've watched for a really long time because of its tie not only to utilities, but directly to our ratepayers. I'm running really on three basic principles. Number one is to lower our monthly bills for consumers. And that's really one of my main focuses here. When you look at nationwide, the rates and the utility rates that have happened and raises that have happened, Arizona's leading the pack. We're also falling really, really far behind when it comes to development of other renewables, investments in our grid and our transmission, and to ensure that we have reliable, secure energy. So number one, making sure that our grid is up to snuff and that our prices are kept competitive. I'm also very, very interested in building our economy, of course. As a small business owner, I'm really lucky to be able to employ lots of people, not only in the state of Arizona, but nationwide on various projects and things that we've been able to work on. And so being able to be a job creator is something that's very near and dear to my heart. And I want Arizona to be a place where you can create opportunity, economic opportunity, and jobs for lots of people from all walks of life. And the last thing is just accountability for the Corporation Commission. This Corporation Commission, unfortunately, has really rolled back accountability and transparency. And one of the things that I was thinking about the other day, was that how the Corporation Commission, when it was formed at its formation, it was really formed to be a watchdog and a consumer protection advocacy group. And it was formed as a watchdog, but unfortunately, it's now become the lapdog to industry. So by bringing some balance back to the commission and some transparency to the commission, I think that, we need to have more representation from Democrats. And there's also a misconception that, oh, well, Republicans are good at business. They're going to do good on this commission. And I always laugh and I say, have you met our president? How many bankruptcies do we have to go through here? But yeah, I think that there's a lot that can be done to protect the consumer while still and protect the environment, frankly, because the Corporation Commission also has a foothold in what happens to our environment here in the state. Again, make it make sense to me that we're rolling back clean energy mandates, but yet talking about how prices are going to go down. We all know that when the more choice and the more opportunities you have out there, the better it is for the consumer because prices come down. But this Corporation Commission is leaning into coal, it's leaning into natural gas, it's leaning into non-renewables. Without consideration of what renewables could really do for the economy, much less the environment. So there's a whole lot of things that we could go down the rabbit hole and discuss, but those are sort of the top level things in my mind that we need to address. And I think it's pretty sad that it's one of the sunniest states in our great country. We don't have the investment in solar that we should. And solar is not a silver bullet, it doesn't fix everything, but it's certainly a cog in the machine that can help to alleviate some of the issues that we see happening with reliability and availability to keep up with our expanding energy demands. We know that our demand and our hunger as a country for energy is only going to continue to increase. We know that data centers and AI and all of these things that are hot topics of today, we know that that's not going to go away. And it's even something that's changed since the last cycle, this discussion about data centers. So we have to be on our game and we have to have innovative, progressive thinkers on that Corporation Commission to keep pace with the change of what's happening in our economy and in our environment. And I think that's it for now, but I'm happy to answer questions. And as Mr. Hill stated, there are 2 seats that are open. There are 5 candidates that are running. I'm also a PC in Legislative District 7, so I'm up here in Southern Flagstaff, Arizona, and yeah, so I'm just excited to spend some time with our Southern Arizona neighbors.
Thank you so much. So Monica, do you want to manage the questions?
Okay, first question is for the candidates. The utilities always point to need for reliability to avoid solar and wind contracts. What's wrong with this argument?
I'm happy to take a first stab at that one. Um, well, what's wrong is it's kind of an outdated talking point. Again, we need innovative, thinkers who are at the forefront of these technologies and these industries. Solar and wind have come a long way in the last 15, 20 years, and even more so in the last 6 years. Battery storage has really become quite innovative and it's improving all the time. When the reliability issue goes back to, oh, well, the sun doesn't always shine and the wind doesn't always blow. True, that's very true. But we do have wonderful battery storage options now that can augment traditional forms of energy like oil and like natural gas and like all of these other items. So it's not an either or in my mind, but it's definitely an augmenter where you can have a stronger energy ecosystem by adding solar and wind. And interesting point, asterisk, asterisk, solar and wind is now much cheaper than non-renewables. And that's something that those that are in the non-renewables industry don't really want to talk about, but it is much cheaper now. That wasn't always the case, but the technology and the innovation has come so far now that it really can be a good, reliable source of energy, and it is for many, many states across the country.
I'll just add that one of the beautiful things about renewables is that they can tie into the grid just like any other power source. And so, a lot of people, bring up, oh, well, up here in Phoenix, we had that huge Haboob, what was it, like 2 months ago? Yeah, it was pretty crazy. Um, but the beauty of it is that we're connected to the same grid, so that's not happening down in Casa Grande, that's not happening down in Tucson, Western Arizona. So you're able to share energy across huge geographic areas, and so while one area might be temporarily affected, you can draw on the renewable resources from others.
Okay, thank you. Next question. This year, the contract the city of Tucson had with Tucson Electric Power expired. A movement developed to opt to purchase the TEP infrastructure and operate the utility publicly. How do you feel about efforts to make utilities in Arizona publicly owned?
I'll take a stab at that. So yeah, so what was proposed by quite a few people regarding TEP is similar to what we have up in the valley with Salt River Project. Basically, Salt River Project is, well, it's weird. Technically, it's publicly owned utility, and so as a result, it operates as a nonprofit. There are no investors to distribute dividends to. So all that money, one, you don't have to collect it in the first place, and two, you can reinvest any excess money that comes in to improve the grid, improve the services. And I would say that SRP, for the most part, has worked out very well for the Valley area. Um, the one thing to be aware of, though, is that by becoming a public utility, SR Salt River Project has an elected board based on their own sort of weird districts. And because they're accountable to voters through those board elections, they are not accountable to the Corporation Commission. Um, there's some language that basically the Corporation Commission regulates investor owned utilities. And so that's just one thing to be aware of, is that if TEP or the infrastructure were to be taken over by Tucson in part or in whole, um, then the ACC is kind of hands off, and that regulation goes to your local elected officials.
Okay, next question. Please address public power, TEP and Project Blue. Please address Copper World and Benson Aluminum Plant.
Okay, so I think the first 2 points about addressing public power and TEP, that probably goes to the first question, correct? I'm guessing, the one that Jonathan just spoke about.
Yeah, this previous question.
Right, the previous question. Yeah, like Jonathan said, there are some pros and cons that come with public utility versus a non-public utility. The main one being the jurisdiction of the Corporation Commission on a public versus non-public utility. SRP has an elected board, and I think in my mind, the risk there is just that people don't realize that they have an elected body, another elected body over that public utility. So a lot of people that I speak to, like, oh, I didn't realize I was supposed to, do an election for the SRP board. It's sort of out of sight, out of mind. They assume that it's covered by the Corporation Commission. So that's one of the cons. Of course, there are lots of pros as well from having a public utility. Certainly, other jurisdictions, working with public utilities, there it does have a more direct tie to the community in terms of elected bodies, etc. But there's sometimes that confusion. On the other things with Project Blue, that's the data center that was not a popular data center in Southern Arizona, and I think I'm not anti-development by any means, but I do think it has to be smart development. It has to make sense. And unfortunately, a lot of these, I would say, they're too good to be true in some cases, right? They promise a lot of economic development, a lot of tax, a lot of lease, but what it costs and the downside can often be not in the best interest of the community where they're placed. They're very resource intensive, take a lot of electricity. Even in a closed loop water system, it takes a lot of water, which, if you look around in our environment, is not something we have a great abundance of. As a tribal member, I'm also keenly aware that we do have tribal nations that have not settled water settlements within our state. So there's another layer of complexity. We have a very robust farming and agricultural community that also has water rights, grandfathered in water rights on certain parcels. So we have to keep all of these things in mind when we're talking about this hungry demand for energy. And I think that when we're thinking about data centers in particular, it has to make sense, it has to be efficient, it has to bring economic benefits that outweigh any of those other costs. And right now, in my opinion, those costs are pretty high from the environmental standpoint with water, not to mention the footprint that's needed for some of these large data centers. And I think it's a dangerous road to go down, to put a bunch of things, a bunch of eggs in one basket and say, we're going to go data centers, it's going to bring all this money. If it sounds too good to be true, it's probably not true. And that's just one of the viewpoints there. And I have friends and really good friends that work in that industry of the data center industry, and they're looking, they're hunting, they're out there. They want to put, they want to put these large centers in places, but it's got to make sense. And it doesn't make sense for our communities here.
Yeah, and I'll add that, one the issue, or the area where the data centers and also, the Benson proposed plant, Copper World, where those large projects intersect the Corporation Commission, is basically all the infrastructure that has to be built to support them. So the data centers specifically, usually they need dedicated transmission lines. So they have to put the large, not the small little, short local transmission lines that go through your neighborhoods, but the really tall, high voltage transmission lines. They have to run those through neighborhoods directly to the data centers. They have to build new substations just for them. Same thing with Benson and Copper World. And I think, and I would assume that all the Democratic commission candidates would agree that, the commission needs to make sure that the regular customers aren't subsidizing those industries. If they need additional infrastructure, then they need to pay for it. That's not for all the moms and pops out here in the community to be chipping in money to support that when they're going to receive no benefit from it at all. So I think that's an important aspect to the commission. And then on the last little subject, or the last piece of that question that was thrown in there, I think we're really lucky this election cycle. Like Maggie said, we have 5 Democratic candidates for the Corporation Commission for those 2 seats. For the last decade, our party has really struggled to find just enough candidates to run, to fill out the ballot. Because if we don't fill out the ballot, you concede seats to the Republicans. And so I think, yeah, we're in a rare situation where we have an abundance of candidates. Couldn't be more wonderful. And so, I would encourage you to sign for, you can only sign for 2, online or in person, but I would encourage you to sign for 2, regardless of who it is. And yeah, just support everybody. And then we can put it to the Democratic primary to determine who everyone thinks is best suited to go up against whoever the Republican opponents end up being.
Thank you. Next question. Being a statewide office, after the primary, is there any statewide entity that can get the word out about the role of the ACC and the importance of diversifying the ACC?
Yeah,
Well,
we've been hitting all these. Well, I've been hitting, and I know that Derek and Jonathan are all hitting these LD meetings, and these are critically important. So we depend on all of you to help us with that. Additionally, there's some C3 groups out there that are doing some education. And Jonathan, I know since you ran last time, you might have more insight into some of those groups that were able to make some inroads on the education front.
yeah, so unfortunately, the entity that should be publicizing the commission and making sure people understand it is the commission. Um, but having people not understand what it does is working out really well for the Republicans. So I don't think that they're in any hurry to change the status quo on that. But yeah, as Clara said, there are a number of C3 organizations that did a really good job in 2024 of there are ones working from an environmental perspective. There's ones working from an economic perspective, basically almost any perspective you look at it. This is an important issue for working class people, for seniors, for veterans, for any group you can think of. And so all those groups were really encouraging them to do even more outreach this time, really talk to their members, and help them understand how much it impacts them. And like I said, luckily it usually tends to be like a 30-second pitch, and you have people on board. They want to know more about it. Um, Unfortunately, those people aren't going to get that from a billboard. They're not going to get that from a YouTube or TikTok ad. They need to get that in person. They need to have some sort of human interaction to get that word across. So that's why we're pushing that so much.
Thank you. The next question. The ACC is in charge of securities regulation. How does the ACC enforce ethical securities marketplace to protect citizens from fraud and unethical practices?
Yeah, no, the commission has a really interesting role across a bunch of different, it's sort of like this weird little bureau with different drawers in it. And exactly right, one of the jobs is to ensure that securities, that there's no waste, fraud, and abuse within those industries. It kind of acts almost like in other states, the Secretary of State is the entity that takes in business filings, and that role is taken over by the Arizona Corporation Commission in Arizona. So if somebody wants to come and do business in the state and register an entity, they go through the Corporation Commission to do that. And that requires the filing of documentation to show, who's in charge of that entity, who owns that entity. Arizona is also a state that does not allow for blind filings. For example, the state of New Mexico, Delaware, we wonder why people file businesses in Delaware. It's because you can do blind filings in Delaware. Arizona doesn't have that. And part of the reason is to ensure that people that are coming to do business in our state are good actors, that we don't have foreign entities, that there's no money trafficking going through. And that is also a very important role of the Corporation Commission to monitor that and to make sure that, people who are coming to our state are doing what they say they're going to do and they are who they say they are. Which is really important. They collect fees and filing fees on that, and depending on the type of entity, whether you're perpetual, non-perpetual, you have to file annual filings to affirm that. If you're filing as a corporation, because a corporation is a person, we can go down a whole rabbit hole in that. But if you're filing as a corporation, that is a required annual filing as well, along with whoever are managing members or shareholders within that corporation. So that's that function within the ACC. Jonathan, I didn't know if you had anything to add to that.
That's wonderful. I'll just add that the commission is also in charge of some really weird things, like railroad safety. That's a lot. We don't spend a whole lot of time on the campaign trail talking about that, but it's actually really important. One of my first, I'll admit I'm a lifelong Arizonan. Until I was like 37, I actually didn't know what the commission was either. So I forgive everyone who hasn't heard of it. But one of my first interactions with it was I live in Tempe, and uh, in 2020 during the pandemic, there was a huge train derailment on the 100 and I think at that point 15-year-old railroad bridge over the Salt River. Huge fire, bridge partially collapsed, dumped a bunch of toxic stuff in the lake, and everyone was like, "Who's in charge of this?" It's the Corporation Commission. So yeah, it's all these little weird corners that we could talk all night about if we had time, but they get kind of niche really fast.
Okay, a final question is for both of you is how are the clean elections donations going?
They're going. Yeah, I think that this is one of the offices that really makes sense to do clean elections, given the role that the commission has in regulating companies. So you wouldn't want to take seems like it just would make sense, right? You don't want to take money from PACs and companies when you could be turning around and monitoring and watchdogging those things. So it's going well. I think, at least on my campaign's end, it's been a real good turnout to talk to groups such as the LD groups, county Democrat groups, and that's really where we've been able to make a lot of inroads in the donations. But it is a slog. You do have to, collect those fives, and pretty quick you end up, people will hand you fives with no forms, and you're like tracking them down. Wait, hold on, you got to fill out this form. So we really encourage people to do that online because it's so much easier to track, and it's a better process to just go through the online portal. So I don't have a wad of fives in my pocket at all times.
I'm going to interrupt just for a second here. I have a little spiel at the very end of how to do that. So we'll get some more for you.
Thank you so much.
Perfect. Yeah, and I'll say, for my campaign, the fives are going great. That's something we're focusing on so much more this time around, because unfortunately, all that money you get for the primary has to be spent before the primary. Otherwise, you have to give it back. And last time I only qualified for the clean elections money, a couple weeks out, and so we were really stressed trying to spend all that money, and we spent it well, but we could have spent it better. And so the goal this time is to qualify so much earlier. And the plug I always give is that when you give us those $5 for clean elections, that becomes $250. So I could be here tonight asking every single person here for a check for $250. I won't do that. Just give us the five. It counts just the same. So I don't know if it's already happened, but we'll get our links for signing and the clean elections in the chat here. And then, hope Maggie will give you a detailed instructions on how to do it. It's not that hard. Just you have to work through it the first time.
Well, thank you. That was very instructive, and it was fun to listen to you guys. So thanks for spending your time with us.
Yeah, thanks so much for having us.